With Avengers Endgame upon us later on this month, I'm taking this chance to do a little bit of a re-review of some of the Marvel movies that I've reviewed over the years. Well, technically I'm doing the slate that I did last year, which was the Avengers films and the Captain America sequels. But whatever. Today we're going to be talking about the Avengers. And before I get into my review, here's a little message. Before I go on, don't forget to smash that like button, smash that share button, and if you're new here, smash that subscribe button so you can watch more reviews like this one, and give a little tap to the gray bell icon for notifications on my latest uploads. Back to the review. After 5 movies in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, in 2012, Marvel, just made the comic book movie genre explode with The Avengers, which was, at the time, the 3rd highest grossing film of all time, and for a while held the record for the highest grossing superhero film ever. That is until Infinity War came out. But just as a little recap, The Avengers is basically about, Loki comes down to Earth and he's about to enslave the world and basically, invade the Earth. And so this government body called S.H.I.E.L.D. calls on the Avengers and, quips and action scenes ensue. And when I mean quips and action scenes, that's really the majority of the film. The majority of the film is really just a bunch of dialogue, like a bunch of snappy dialogue, with a lot of really explosive action scenes. It's easy to not be that impressed today considering Infinity War happened, but back then, this was a huge deal. We had never seen anything like the Avengers happen. Like, we saw these standalone superhero movies, but we were not sure if this, Avengers movie could actually work. Ultimately, it does. The Avengers does really work. Are there some problems with it? Yeah, I'll get to those here in a bit, but this still is a very enjoyable film. All of the heroes, Iron Man, Hulk, Thor, Captain America, Black Widow, and, Hawkeye, all of them are very entertaining to watch, and their personalities really do shine when they, argue with each other a whole lot. And all the actors portraying them do a really good job. The newcomer of which was Mark Ruffalo as Bruce Banner, aka the Hulk. And I think he might be the best Hulk we've had yet. Eric Bana was good, although I feel like the real problem with Hulk was the script and direction. Edward Norton was also really good, but I feel like with Mark Ruffalo is a much more experienced Hulk. He's not always, he's not always, energized, and that's rightfully so because you don't want to let out the beast, you don't want to risk that. So he kind of just, stands there like, it's almost like half-assing a performance, but with a purpose. It really does work with this version of the Hulk. Loki, played by Tom Hiddleston, is a very entertaining villain. I mean, yeah, we've seen the whole I want to take over the world thing a whole lot, but, I mean, he plays it off pretty well. Rewatching the Avengers for this review, I kind of realized something that I hadn't really noticed before. Now, if you know me, I don't feel like DC's problem with their Justice League movie was that they didn't have individual movies for each character. I think you could do, just a straight-up superhero team-up film with no other movies beforehand. It can work. You just have to be really, really good at introducing them. Because, the first X-Men film, everybody loves that movie, and yet all the X-Men were just thrown into that film. Star Wars A New Hope, that was a movie that had a bunch of characters, and they didn't need standalone movies. Lord of the Rings, that movie had a ton of characters, and none of them needed to have their own movie. The reason why those movies worked was because the writers and directors of those films were able to introduce these characters in a very flowing way that felt natural without having to have a bunch of backstory movies. And I feel like Justice League could have done that as well. And even in The Avengers, a movie that did have a bunch of setup movies, you could still watch The Avengers and still get it. They make sure to let you know who these characters are, what their brief backstory was, or at least a hint of it, but just enough for you to get, okay, I get it with these characters now. I can move on with the film. Whether it's, showing how Steve Rogers ended up in modern times. Bruce Banner sort of talks about his experience when being the Hulk, and his experience when he became the Hulk. They briefly go into Thor and Loki's backstory. They briefly go into Black Widow's backstory. Tony's backstory is dealt with a little bit. this film does set up the backstories, even though they've already did the backstories. Basically, my point is that even though it worked with the Avengers by having a bunch of movies setting up the heroes and then a team-up movie, that doesn't mean it, won't work if you have a team-up movie and no other backstory movies, because all you have to do is just write it well, which, granted, is very hard to do, but it is possible. And even the Avengers had those brief moments of backstory to get you all caught up, and especially to get people who hadn't seen those other movies caught up. The action is really fun to watch, and for the most part, the visual effects still hold up today, even after, like, what was it, 7 years? Also, speaking of the action, I don't really get why a lot of people complained about Man of Steel when that movie had a bunch of destruction in a city and like, many people got killed, because guess what? The Avengers did the exact same thing a year earlier. How did people not complain about the Avengers when, there was a bunch of destruction? And look, I'm not complaining about the destruction because, hey, it works for the films and they were dealt with. Batman v Superman addressed the destruction in that film, and Captain America Civil War not only addressed the destruction in this movie, but also Age of Ultron, Captain America the Winter Soldier, I think Thor the Dark World as well, if I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong, and they also addressed, Captain America Civil War earlier. Again, why was everybody complaining about Man of Steel having those city destruction scenes when the Avengers had just as much, if not more damage, considering those big whale spaceship things? I don't really know what those are, but like, come on, that's really hypocritical. I do have some issues though with the film. For example, there are a few green screen shots that don't really hold up all that well, but overall, The Avengers is still a really fun adventure, action film. Nothing really too deep, but it's still, really enjoyable. So yeah, I would recommend seeing The Avengers, even though you most likely already have. So yeah, what do you think of The Avengers? What do you think of the MCU movies overall? Which one's your favorite? Which one do you think is the worst? Let me know down in the comments below what you think. Thank you so much for watching. Give this video a like. Share the video so we can get the channel circulated. Don't forget to support my Patreon on my Patreon page, or if you can't do that, then consider supporting me through my PayPal donation button in the description below. And if you want to see more, click this.